I call it the chamber. Hello, everybody, and welcome to RMS, Rants, Monologues, Speeches, another Brave New World edition. And I won't move around this time as much. So, if you have read Brave New World, you probably remember the scene near the end of the book. I'm at page 237 in the Everbind Books edition. And so basically, these two individuals, the Savage and the Controller, are having a Shakespearean battle, using philosophies from old books and stuff to battle each other. The Controller uses old texts, to show how the Brave New World is better, and happiness is better than truth. And the Savage is using Shakespeare and God to say all this stuff is instinctual. We need to, being a philosopher is instinctual, asking questions. We need to change and all that. And the Controller keeps saying that would destroy civilization. Now, earlier in this book, I had this idea. To contradict what the Controller would say about being against change. The idea was two parts. One part was the classic progressivism solution, where how can you say that change isn't important when you wouldn't have what you have now without change? How can you say that progressives are idiots or science people are idiots or anything when you take the wheel and fresh water and fire for granted? If you were in the time of the inventor of the wheel and you criticized and killed the wheel maker and every wheel maker after him, you would never have any car. Another was a bit more barbaric. You have to break down muscle to make new muscle, in the traditional sense. There's probably going to be some kind of scientific advancement where you can just do something and make muscle grow better without having to break muscle, but I hate the idea that you have to break muscle to make muscle is used in so many bad, abusive situations, but I have a better solution. This is the chamber. It starts off with the muscle theory, and then it goes to a philosophy science theory. So, Mr. Mustafa Mons, here's a predicament for you. If you are trapped in a chamber, and the only way out of the chamber is to lift the door up and get it to this point where it will click into place and you can crawl out. The door is extremely heavy, and you are not heavy enough to lift it. So, I'll leave that. So, you have two ways to get out. Your first way is to exercise and get strong enough to escape this wall, and then go out to whatever you want. Now, this is all assuming that your goal is to leave. Mr. Mons' goal probably would not be to leave, and would probably be to take whatever substitutes are in this chamber, philosophic, metaphoric chamber. But I'm talking about the literal chamber. If you want to get out, you have two ways. Your first way is to just start doing push-ups and start doing all this stuff and try to make yourself as jacked as possible. In this chamber, it's hyperbolic. You don't age and you don't lose time. You have an infinite time, like a summer vacation. During the vacation, time is infinite. Time does not pass. Sure, it may be outside, but you can live so many realities in the time span of a minute, given the proper situation. So, you work out, you hurt yourself, you break your muscles, you get new ones, and then you lift, and you get out, and you escape. Now, after that, there's so many philosophies. There's philosophy of a heaven-like area outside, And the metaphor is you have to struggle through life to reach an afterlife, which is a horrible one because it was abused in the Middle Ages in Europe. There's the, oh, if you'll escape from this chamber, there's another chamber out there that's no different, with a slightly only has a slightly different challenge. That's a very interesting philosophy as well. However, there's another way to get out. The scientific and the scientific way to get out, which would be to use whatever's in the room to pry open the door, or just to, all sorts of engineering and scientific and all sorts of things, using whatever you have to get out without having to, work out. Or maybe you have to work out, but maybe it's just a little. Maybe you only need a little bit more muscle mass to pry open the door. Or maybe you're strong enough to open the door a few inches, and then you open the door a few inches, and then stick your foot under it. Or your shoe or something. Presuming that your foot does not get completely eviscerated and chopped off, this'll work. And then, because things do not get any heavier the higher they are, no matter what you might think with gravitational potential energy, you can fall asleep, you can eat, and then you can come back with your foot still under the door and lift again. And then get more of your foot under the door. And then more, and eventually get both your feet under the door, doing 1 inch at a time for several days. You're not working out, you're not getting any more muscular, but if every day you get 1 inch, you can eventually get out without having to exercise. And that door will not get any heavier. It won't get any lighter, but it won't get any heavier. And it will actually seem to get lighter the more leverage you get. Gravitational potential energy pisses me off because people think that having something higher than the other thing makes it heavier, when it doesn't. Gravitational potential energy is like dark matter. It's nonsense. It's just a replacement for something that you can't explain. When actually, it's not gravitational potential energy as distance from the surface, it's distance from whatever you're measuring from. If I have a table and I put a block under one ball and the other ball is just staying on the table, you can say that the ball on the block has more gravitational potential energy. But actually, this is post-record. I have a better solution for this. Gravitational potential energy is bullshit because you can say one thing has this much gravitational potential energy, this much whatever energy, and then when it stops, it only has gravitational potential energy. And then when it reaches the ground, it has 0 gravitational potential energy. But what if this table that you're measuring from, you knock out the legs and the table falls down? Suddenly, hey, you have gravitational potential energy again. That came from nowhere. You say that energy is consistent, neither internal gravitational potential energy or kinetic energy or all that other stuff. Elastic, internal. Then where does all this sudden gravitational potential energy come from when you knock out the legs of the table and the table falls down and you get an extra 3 feet of falling? It's just gravitational potential energy is very irrelevant. If you just lower the ground, suddenly you have more energy. People have to admit that gravitational potential energy is not actual energy. You do not gain energy by falling. You are moving through space in a way that you're moving through space. And just because you're moving through space does not mean you have speed. Speed is relative. There was an episode, I think it was Vsauce, but it might have been Veritasium, where if you close a pair of scissors, it was Vsauce. If you close a pair of scissors, then the point between the two scissors moves really fast, faster than the scissors themselves. And if you add extremely long scissors, you can close them and make the point move faster than light or whatever. And you couldn't move scissors that fast because it's not a solid object. You have the particles in between vibrating at the speed of light, and You can't close it. It will, like, close one part at a time. But while you can't close scissors from the holes on a pivot point that fast, if they're that big, what you can do is have two independent scissor blades flowing and spinning through space at no set speed. And then if they pass each other, from one, the other may look like it's moving faster than the speed of light or something. Point being, just because you're falling through space does not mean you have energy. Getting pulled by gravity does not mean you're having more energy than when you're not getting pulled by gravity. And sometimes things look like they're getting pulled by gravity, but they aren't, and you are. It's relativity. Gravitational potential energy is bullshit because of relativity. That is what I meant to say. Sorry for the ramble. If the block and the balls are on a table, then wouldn't that mean that those things have higher gravitational energy, potential energy than something off the table? What about something on another table that's slightly higher? If you do all the experiments, and you all have them land on their table, even if the table is higher up, then it doesn't matter. Gravitational energy and potential energy only matters in its experiment. It matters nothing in the world of multiple experiments. It's like drawing patterns. If you are running a random number generator, and you run it 1,000,000 times, and as you're watching it, you suddenly see 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 10 ones in a row, even though that wasn't 10, you may freak out. You may be astonished. However, that actually doesn't work quite right. The idea is that we as humans, with our brains, and maybe it's an intelligence thing, maybe it's a human thing, but we like to see patterns. And we draw patterns where they may not even be. So we can say that statistics and everything work in certain ways from observation, but not always are we really right. If you see a pattern somewhere, you can say, look here, if we start here and stop here, this is exactly what we thought would happen. If you say something has a 90% chance to happen, and you find a string of 10 digits, where it goes 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 9 times, and then 0. You can say, our solution worked. This is exactly what we thought. And we found 100 other situations where this happened, which means it must be 90% occurrence. Now, here's the thing. If you slide your category back one, where you start at right before the first one and end right after the last number, the 0, if you slide that back, then you could have 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 10 ones, or a 0. And then it would be still 9 out of 10, but if there's another 0 after that, another 0 after that, another 0 after that, you keep sliding, and you get 8 out of 10, 7 out of 10, 6 out of 10, 5 out of 10. Drawing lines doesn't prove you right. You have to take everything in the entire test as your test. You can't just draw lines here and say this is the test when you win. And even then, when you do 100 tests, you can't say that this is the result. If you do 100 tests and it's 90% of the time in that test, counting all of it, you can say this works. However, if you kept going, if there are two people doing this test, and one of the person stops at 100 and the other person stops at 200, the person who went to 100 successfully proved their thing. The person who went to 200 proved that, well, supposedly proved that no, it actually happened 50% out of 100, or 60 or something, and almost the entirety of the second 100 was the opposite result. And then you have two people who ran tests, and they get, different answers. The first person says that they were done, but then the other person ran more tests and proved them wrong. Then someone can run more tests and prove it right again, and then wrong again. This is why statistics is founded on unstable ground. When we run an emulator on our calculators for a coin flip, I remember I used to have a coin flip app, I would always argue that if it's really true chance, then you could get heads every single time. And then people respond with, eventually, it will become 50-50. And they run it randomized over and over again, and after about 70-ish tries or something, it comes up as equal on both sides. I say, well, what was it before then? Well, it was 49 to, it was slightly off, but I ran it again, and now it's 50-50. I'm like, okay, run it again. Well, obviously, since it's an odd number, it's not going to be even. Then why are you only measuring at even numbers? You don't have the authority to decide when your test is done. Testing in randomness never is done. We just say it's done when we're right. This is why statistics is bullshit in the way that we think of it. We cannot use statistics to truly prove anything. I use Pokemon as a great example. People flip out when they fail to catch something because of the catch rate. That's what they blame. Or they blame someone hacking when you are paralyzed for 10 turns in a row. Or if you keep flinching. Or if they get all the critical hits and you get no critical hits. What people fail to realize is that when a move has 90% accuracy, you cannot say that it should hit 9 times out of 10. People do not understand what we mean when we say statistics. It's not that it will happen 9 times out of 10. It's that every time it happens, it will happen. I mean, it's that every time it happens, it has a chance to happen, and that chance is 90 out of 100. But when you break it down into that, and you say, okay, I have a 99% chance for this to happen. What's the chance it won't happen? 1%. If you run it 7 times, and it fails every single time, it gets that 1%, that doesn't prove anything. It doesn't lift your chance of the probability of the thing, because you simply rolled the 1% every time. There's nothing in the code of the game that prevents you from running into a shiny every single encounter, or getting a crit every single time, or flinching never, or being frozen and never getting unfrozen unless you use a fire type move. When Pokemon are frozen, and it's a very rare thing to get frozen, there is a 20% chance to unfreeze every turn. 100% chance if you use a fire type move or certain other moves on you or against someone when you're frozen. Which means that if you don't reach these instances, you could never unfreeze, because 80% chance to not unfreeze. Here's the thing, though. Just because if it was switched around and it was an 80% chance to get unfrozen, you still have no reason to complain if every single turn you never unfreeze, because it's that 20% chance. And every single test is different. Every single test runs on its own rules. Just because the first test, things don't add up. People think, oh, you want to flip a coin and you think it's going to be heads both times? Well, that decreases your chances. However, in practice, in reality, well, no, in theoretics, in something, that doesn't make any sense, because you're starting now. If we start a test on Monday, and we say, okay, we're gonna flip 4 coins and see what we get, and if we get whatever, okay. Next day, we're gonna flip 4 coins, and we flip it, and we get 2 heads and 2 tails. And he says, see, I told you it was 50-50. Well, why are you only counting today? Why aren't you counting yesterday when it was 3-4 heads versus tails? And he's saying, well, that was his own experiment. No! If you're going to count these 4 flips as their own experiment, then you have to count every flip that has ever been done. Why are you excluding the flips from the earlier session? And goddamn, I really got off topic. First, I'm talking about Brave New World and philosophies of the chamber and how change is necessary. Like, oh my god. Well, I guess I'll try again to go across the chamber, but this episode veered off into statistics. This is why I hate programmers. Because programmers think in the statistic mindset. Because they can say, oh, I'm going to run a program that's going to flip a coin 100 times. And see, it comes out to be almost exactly 50-50. And, oh god, what's static? I'm getting really bad static for some reason. I must be doing this. Yeah, it's that. I'm sorry, guys. I trade off not moving around for causing a bunch of static. Also, there's a lot of sounds going on in the house. But here's what I want everyone who sees this to take away. Here's what I want everyone to take away. Or take into consideration is what I meant. I only want the people to take my words in consideration. Sincere consideration. This. Just because every single time that we've said that a test is done, a coin flips heads 50% of the time, does not mean that every coin you flip now for the rest of your life could be tails. And every single encounter in your Pokemon game, if you play Pokemon, could be a shiny. Every encounter could be a shiny. You could never catch something unless it's a 100% chance. You could get critted every single time and never get critted, and all of it would be completely feasible. And I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet. Because if there's a chance for it to happen once, there's a chance for it to happen every single time. And there are no magical laws denying that fact. If your opponent has a 5% chance to crit, and they crit you, then why can't they crit you every single time? The numbers in probability mean nothing after the fact. It either happened or it didn't. Whether or not it had a 50 or 90% chance to happen means nothing when it has happened. If it has a chance to happen once, it can happen every single time. Every number generator in existence that goes from a 1 to 100 could run 100 every single time from now on. And it would be completely normal and completely feasible by my logic. And yet everyone else would lose their shit and think all the systems are broken or hacked. People do not understand statistics. If it has a chance to happen once, it has a chance to happen every single time. There are no magical laws preventing this. Please take that into consideration. There's literally no magical reason that something should happen differently just because last time it happened a certain way. The effects of the first test do not affect the second test because there never was a first test. Not in your lifetime. God. How ironic. I was going to leave off the last word with the topic of the first tangent. I gotta get back to the Brave New World thing. The chamber, and if has a chance to happen once, a chance to happen every time. That's this episode. I hope that was understandable. By the way, I may be starting another Pokemon Let's Play. See ya.